Here are 3 ways to fix a hacked website, especially if someone is sabotaging your SEO with hundreds and thousands of links. The first thing that you'll need to do is install something like WordFence, where basically they will block bots and people coming from other countries and people that are trying to brute force your login page, okay? So it's worth every penny if you've got WordFence because you need to protect it, especially if you don't think you're a target. We've had a few of our clients be targets of hacks and they had hundreds and thousands of URLs injected into their sites when they didn't think that they would be some sort of target, right? So it's a good idea to use something like this. If you're using Shopify, then you can just contact Shopify support. They usually have built-in security already, but it's more of a concern for WordPress itself. And then changing the login URL. So it's one thing to block bots and people coming from other countries. I've got another video on how to do that. The other thing is to change the default login URL for WordPress and change it to something else. Okay, so there are little plugins for free that you can use, WPS hide login, for example, and you can just change the login URL in general. Now, hackers can still find your login area, but it makes it more likely that majority of them do not know your login, so they won't bother with bots and things like that. The third thing here is to delete dead plugins and update old plugins as well to fix any vulnerabilities, because what happens over time, the whole reason usually plugins have updates is because there's some sort of security vulnerability that a hacker has found on a plugin. They can, hack websites and collect sensitive data. When plugins say that they've got an update, usually it's a good thing for you to update that really quickly, majority of the time, so that hackers can't exploit those existing vulnerabilities that are blasted out there on the dark web or something. So I've got another tutorial on how to do that as well, and I'll link it below somewhere. Now, the second thing is to set up redirects, which is very important because what's happening at the moment, this hacker has added 100,000 URLs to your website and Google is returning them as 200. So basically they're saying, hey, it's all okay. These look like legit URLs on the actual website, but you know that they're not correct. You don't have those pages. So what you need to do is basically tell search engines like Google and Bing and stuff like that, that these pages are 410s. So you're trying to tell Google to delete this from your information base. We don't want you to crawl these pages or index them in any way, because what you might have found is the hacker has installed all these URLs to your home page and basically duplicated your home page 100,000 times, but has different URLs with the question mark in front and added a little parameter there. So you need to mark them as 410s. So how do you do that? What you can do is use Claude or ChatGPT or something else, and you try to see if there's any other patterns. So for example, these ones are all randomized, right? They've got different ones here, and they're a lot harder to exclude. You're going to have to do these at the server level, which I'll explain later on how to do. If you're lucky enough, the hacker has used the same pattern over and over. So they use casino and / blah, 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 or maybe they have like a question mark and then an X and then a / and that's on all the URLs. Then that's great because it makes your job a lot easier to remove all of them with a prefix. So basically what you're going to do is you can go into, let's say, rank math, or if you're in Shopify, find a redirection SEO tool, and you're just going to add a new redirect, and you just make sure you change it to a regex model here. And what you're going to do is you're going to tell ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your LLM of choice is to say that, hey, you got hacked and you're using rank math and you need to come up with regex that's going to block all these pages. It'll help you delete a lot of them, and you just mark them as 410s, like content deleted. Okay, you put the source URL for the whole regex code that you have, and ChatGPT or LLMs of your choice will tell you what to actually put in there, and then you start to add that redirect so that you're telling all search engines that, hey, please stop crawling these. We don't want you to rank these for us. Okay, so basically, in this case, the example is if it's casino and all of them start with casino, we just have the prefix, or in this case, rank math does regex, which is pretty cool. So you could just do regex, which is sometimes even better. And then it can just block out anything like that and mark them as 410s, which is really cool. Now, the third thing from there is to remove them from Search Console. So if you go to Google Search Console and you see this little removals tab here, you'll then click on new request and it'll say temporary removal URL. Now, you don't do the clear snippet because that's to do with like meta titles and descriptions and stuff, like for those snippets. But in this case, it's just the whole URL that we want to block. Now, it's going to take you forever to do one URL at a time if you've got 100,000 URLs to do. So normally you just use a prefix. So what you're going to do is go to LLMs or ChatGPTs of your choice again and just put in the prefix like we discussed just before. And then that will help block that. Now, there are are other scenarios where it's not this simple, where you've got, casino and that's like the pattern that they're using. Sometimes it's not that simple. Sometimes they'll have different URLs for each of these, right? So they'll have totally different URLs and it's totally randomized. So you see here as well, they've got all these different randomized ones here. Now that makes it extremely difficult to block out, and you're gonna need to do these at the actual server level, because otherwise you've got hundreds of thousands of pages trying to block them one by one. It's probably gonna take you a couple of weeks to like do all of them. So the way you do it instead is you go to your server. Now, if you're lucky enough to use like Lovable or something like that for AI websites, then you could probably tell it to do something like this to block it out dynamically. But if you're using WordPress or something like that, and you've got a classic hosting provider, go to your hosting provider and tell them, hey, can you inject XYZ code? Now the code might look like this, but you got to change it based on what the actual hacked URLs look like. So feed all the URLs from some sort of CSV or spreadsheet into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, Gemini, and then tell it to write code that looks like this, and then send this off to the people that are managing your hosting, and then tell them to inject it for you so that you can fix your SEO. And this takes care of a lot of the heavy lifting, because it's not enough for you to tell Google to temporarily relieve the URLs from the search engine. The heavy lifting is actually done at the 410 level. Okay, so if we make sure that we're returning 410s for all these URLs, we're telling Google, hey, this is irrelevant content, or we don't want you to crawl it whatsoever. So that's how you can fix it ASAP. Those are the 3 steps I would do today if you're in a hurry and you've just been hacked. Make sure everyone's on the same level. Anyone who's managing a website, make sure you're all on the same page on how this is going to work so that you fix your SEO, because what the hackers are doing is trying to sabotage your SEO, so you lose sales, you lose leads, and it's really, really frustrating. It's damaging to the brand as well, as you know. I hope that helps. If you've got any questions, leave them below. More than happy to answer. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.